Colin, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Dude, 100%. I've been looking forward to this for a while. So we finally got it scheduled. Perfect timing because you got a new book coming out as well, which I can't wait to talk about. But dude, for people that somehow don't know you and your story, give us the spark notes. You know, who you are, where you coming from, what are you doing now?
I'm just a kid from Portland, Oregon. So no, I grew up in Portland, Oregon. I now live in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Love being in nature in the mountains, which I think has probably drawn me to a lot of the big expeditions and adventures I've undertaken. I suppose I'm probably most well known in the public landscape for having 10 world records, being the first person in history to cross Antarctica solo, a lot of adventures like that, up and down mountains, exploring cold and frigid places. But I think of myself more than anything as, someone who just loves to dive into human potential and mindset and curiosity. And so really this new book, The 12-Hour Walk, as well as really what I'm passionate about in general is exploring that through the creative lens of how we can push ourselves. And that might mean that, if you're listening to this, you might not want to go freeze your butt off and walk across Antarctica by yourself. I don't blame you for that. But my passion is connecting with people around what their passions are, what their curiosities are, what their goals, what their hopes and dreams are, and really being able to unlock people's best lives. And so the new book is really oriented around bestowing and sharing that wisdom, as well as that's just what lights me up, man.
Yeah, dude, I'm so excited for this conversation because this is all the stuff that I geek out about as well. Like I love being in nature. I love random excursions and I love mindset and expedition, or like I love the mental growth that is accompanied with any challenging endeavor. I'm really curious about so you grew up in Portland, Oregon. You now live in Jackson Hole. I've heard it's insanely beautiful. Why did you start all this? What led to this? I guess why all these expeditions?
Yeah, no, it's always funny. Where did it start? Did it start the day I came into this world? 37 years ago. Did it start in some moment in adolescence? I mean, the short answer is, I guess that I was raised in a family. My dad was a former Eagle Scout, so he loved being outside. I didn't have a lot of money when I was a kid. My parents had me in their early 20s. I was actually born on a hippie commune in Olympia, Washington, at home on a futon with like 30 hippies standing around. They literally watching me be born. So that's an untraditional birth and origin story. And again, like my family, we didn't have a lot of financial resources, but a lot of values. There are a lot of values around health and wellness. My family worked in the natural foods, health industry before anyone knew the word organic or sustainable. They were a bunch of hippies at co-ops basically. And my dad's an organic farmer now. So I think there was always just a connection to the outdoors, to the land, to public lands. And instead of any extravagant I guess travels I didn't get on an airplane a lot as a kid, but I lived in the Pacific Northwest. Portland's a great city, but what's really, to me, what great about that part of the country is you can drive 15, 20 minutes outside of Portland in any direction. And, 1 hour you're at the beach, 1 hour you're in the mountains, you're on a trail, you're in lakes, you're in this. And I spent a lot of time as a kid just doing that, not necessarily in an expedition context, right? But in a just like an appreciation for that. So that certainly built and grew over time. I don't know exactly the moment that it struck, but I can't really remember a life without this dream, which is I always also had just a childhood dream of climbing Mount Everest. You can see Mount Hood, which is the tallest mountain in Oregon, from the Portland city limits. It's a beautiful, snow-capped volcano. It's 11,000 feet. So it's no Mount Everest. Everest is 29,000 feet, but it's, you're staring at this big, beautiful mountain. And ultimately that was the mountain that I learned how to climb and mountaineer on. But I realized that was a childhood passion. I often love to frame a question around to other people around goals, dreams, hopes, wishes is, my childhood dream. And I know your theme is, live your dream. Right. And, my question that I ask to people is, what's your Everest? What is your Everest? It could be anything, right? It can be family, entrepreneurship, growth, love, music, art, it doesn't matter. For me, it was Everest, but what's your Everest? What's your big goal? What's your dream? And so that's, definitely what it was for me, but there's so many other parts to my story that I'm sure we'll get into that, twists and turns. And I love what you said about adversity being a great teacher, because I've certainly had a lot of setbacks and adversity along this path towards, continuing to grow and build the life that I have.
Yeah, dude, I love that. It sounds like that was a really cool place to grow up and just surrounded by just opportunity to explore. and really like foster that love. At what point did at what point did they start to get serious though? Like there's a bit of a gap here from
Yeah.
like growing up loving nature to 10 world records and like walking across Antarctica. Like at what point did you start to, was it climbing Mount Hood? Like what part did you start to kind of get a little more serious and intense with it?
Interestingly enough, I actually think a lot of this came in some regard through tragedy. So I'd always wanted to see the world. Like I said, didn't get to travel a lot when I was a kid, but I painted houses ever since I was 15, 16 years old, all the way through college. And I saved up, most of it was pay for books and, things like that I needed in college. But I try to sock away like $1,000 or whatever I could save every year and said, when I graduate, I'm going to travel. And so I had a few $1,000 saved up when it was time to graduate from college, enough to buy, a one-way plane ticket and take a surfboard and a backpack. And I literally, I was hitchhiking around New Zealand, Australia. I was trying to sleep on people's couches, floors, beaches sometimes because they were free, and the police didn't kick me out. An amazing experience as a young person to kind of travel and see a little bit of the world on a shoestring budget. All until I found myself on this small beach in rural Thailand. And, my life changed in an instant. There's some guys on the beach actually jumping a flaming jump rope, which sounds ridiculous, but it's somewhat common in Thailand. I'm 22 years old at the time. So maybe I didn't have the fully formed prefrontal cortex to tell me this is a terrible idea. I was like, gee, that looks like fun. Jumped this flaming jump rope, and in an instant, my life changed. That rope wrapped around my leg and lit my body completely on fire to my neck. Survival mode kind of kicked in when I needed it most. And I jumped into the ocean to extinguish the flames, which definitely saved my life, but not before about 25% of my body was severely burned, predominantly my legs and feet. And now Thailand in general, isn't the best place to have an injury like that. But I was in the middle of nowhere. I was on an island in the remotest part of Thailand. So instead of a ambulance ride, I had a moped ride down a dirt path to a one-room, nursing station. I underwent 8 surgeries in sort of this makeshift operating room. And then in this kind of what they call the ICU, there was a cat running around my bed and across my chest. So it can kind of, they were doing the best that they could, but I was just in a remote part of the world. It's just a place that didn't have, big hospital and things like that. Bad place to have an injury like this. So as I said, a lot of adversity, and this was one of the, certainly at that point in my life, maybe the worst experience of my life. There was so much pain, but the emotional pain was even worse. I'll never forget day 4 or day 5, a doctor walks in and says to me, "Hey, Colin, I hate to tell you this, but you'll probably never walk again normally." And I had been an athlete, a collegiate swimmer, really, I think that's a terrible diagnosis for any person. But certainly me, there's like just a young man in his body as, kind of considering myself an athlete, a big part of my identity, be like, you're never going to be the same. And the heroine of this story is my mother. And the big turning point in my life, to answer your question about where did I get into this, it's interesting to trace it back to this moment, which is my mother. She tells me now that she was crying with the doctors, pleading in the hallways that, for any semblance of good news that she wasn't getting, but she actually never showed me her own fear. She never showed me her own tears, any of that. She actually came into my hospital every single day with this ridiculously huge smile on her face, just daring me to dream about the future, saying things like, "Colin, this is a bad situation. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, but you're 22 years old. There's limitless possibilities in your future. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the positive side of coming back from this." And I now call that, and I read about in the book, it's actually where I opened the book, it's a core premise of the book. I call this a possible mindset, which I define as an empowered way of thinking that unlocks a life of limitless possibilities. I believe now fundamentally that there's a couple different mindsets. We can dive into fear. We can dive into distrust. We can just dive into anxiety, depression, limiting beliefs, excuses, or we can unlock this possible mindset. And I'll be honest, it's not like I instantly went into that. My mom's telling me this. I'm like, "Mom, what are you talking about? Like, look at my legs. Like, I didn't want to play this game."
Do you see this?
Like, yeah, I'm like, "Look at me," But she goes, "Do me a favor and close your eyes and just tell me the first positive visualization that pops into your mind of a goal or you doing something in some point in your future." I was like, "Fine, Mom, I'll play along." So I closed my eyes and I opened them and I was like, well, this is going to sound ridiculous, but I saw myself crossing the finish line of a triathlon, something I'd never done before. And my mom could have very easily said to me, "I said set a goal and a visualization, but like, let's look at these legs, like maybe something, a little more realistic." But she didn't. In fact, she was like, "Actually, great. That's your new goal. In fact, hey, doc, my son's training for a triathlon. She tells the Thai doctor, can you bring in a couple of weights? So he brings in these this ridiculous photo of me with two 10-pound dumbbells in my hand, my waist, my bandage from the waist down. I'm in Thailand and I'm lifting these little weights.
Dude, so cool.
And, fast forward, a couple months, I was in that Thai hospital, flew back to Portland. I still hadn't taken a step. I was carried on and off the plane. I was placed in a wheelchair. My mom helped me literally step by step, one step at a time, learn how to walk. She put this wooden chair in front of my wheelchair every day. And she'd be like, take one step to this wooden chair. And she goes, great, you were successful today. Tomorrow, the chair will move 3 steps away. Tomorrow, the chair will move 10 steps away. And then fast forward 18 months, I moved to Chicago, took a job, trying to kind of get on with my life. And I did sign up for the Chicago Triathlon as I started to slowly learn how to walk and jog again to honor that goal. And I raced that Chicago Triathlon a year and a half after this burn injury. And I finished, but to my complete and utter surprise, I actually didn't just finish the race. I actually won the entire Chicago Triathlon, placing first out of about 5,000 people on the day, which was, a huge, huge surprise. But your question was about how did I get into crossing Antarctica? How did I get into climbing Everest multiple times? How did I get into doing these other things? And to me, it's from this moment. This moment is such a turning point moment where I, left to my own devices, was going to go into a downward spiral of grief, feeling sorry for myself, sadness, anxiety, fear, depression, which I think is justified given the circumstances. But my mother taught me one of life's greatest lessons that, and you alluded to it earlier, that there is so much to be gained through adversity. There is so much, if you can find the way to push through it, if you can find the curiosity to explore the lesson. In this moment, I wouldn't wish that burn accident on my worst enemy. I mean, it was horrible. It caused, pain and trauma to myself, my family, my loved ones. But in the end, it also taught me one of my life's greatest lessons in that moment and unlocked this, what I call a possible mindset. So, we could get into what happens over the next 15 years, and I'm sure we'll unpack some of that. But, I became a professional triathlete after that, and then eventually said, I want to, pursue my childhood dream and this possible mindset. And I talk about this in the book as well. One of the biggest things standing in people's way, the book breaks down a bunch of common limiting beliefs. And one is, I don't have enough money, so therefore I can't live my best life. I always wanted to climb Mount Everest. Mount Everest is super expensive to climb. I didn't have any money when I had that dream. I didn't have any money in my mid-20s, my 30s when I still had that dream. But the possible mindset finds a way. The possible mindset finds a way to say, okay, I can't do this right now, but can I build? Can I grow? Can I evolve? Can I strive? Can I unlock, knock on enough doors until someone helps me and supports me, et cetera? And that can be applied in this context to needing to raise the funds to do your dream. And it can apply to sitting in a hospital room saying, hey, doctors say I'm never going to walk again, but I'm going to figure out not just how to walk, to jog again. So that moment is such a influential turning point in my life where I look at the sliding doors. If my mom helped me turn right, so to speak, but if I had turned left, we certainly wouldn't be having this conversation. I certainly wouldn't have walked across Antarctica by myself. I wouldn't have done the other things. And who knows where my life would have ended up without that deep and important guidance at that influential moment.
What a blessing to have such a positive mother in that moment.
Totally.
Would you view, like, if you can tap into your mindset back when you were experiencing that, when you were sitting in that hospital bed, did you view that as like a rock bottom type of moment for yourself?
100%. I think I faced some level of adversity throughout my childhood. My parents got divorced, although fairly amicable. Just like anything, ups and downs. Losing a grandparent and the sadness of that. But this was by far the deepest, lowest moment at that point in my life. And honestly, if I look back on my life now, this happened 15 years ago, I'm 37 years old now. I would say, I've had some other setbacks and adversities, which is just part of the human experience, right? I've had a lot of successes, but I always like to say, winners lose the most. And what I mean by that is, if you try things, if you strive greatly, you're also going to get knocked down a lot of the time, but that's part of it, right? This fear of failure that we all have, or fear of having these setbacks, sometimes lead people to inaction. But the
Mhm.
people that actually find success, what you find the most is they lost, but they kept persevering. And that's what ultimately led to success. Failure plus perseverance equals success, in my opinion. But yeah, man, I mean, definitely a rock bottom moment. And like I said, left up to my own devices, had my mother not flown all the way over to Thailand and found me in this small makeshift hospital where I was, was when she found me. I honestly, it's hard for me to speculate, but I definitely would not be in the place that I am today. That's for sure.
Yeah, dude, I love stories like this where it's like, hence the question, like rock bottom. I guess in some cases it's perspective. Like if we don't treat it as rock bottom, we'll find a shovel and keep digging, right? But
Mm-hmm.
like we can truly use it as a trampoline if we embrace it properly. Um, I love that winners lose the most concept. I think that's so cool. Our team literally posted on social yesterday saying making mistakes is better than faking perfections.
Yes, I love that.
Like the same exact concept, right? Um, so as you, but I don't want to zoom too far or like go through this part too fast, but like that 18 months, what was the most challenging part for you of that rehabilitation? And ultimately, I mean, dude, winning the Chicago Triathlon is pretty insane, right? To come out of what you had endured. What was the most challenging part of that, I guess, like rehab process, for lack of a better
No,
term?
it's a good question. It's not a question that I get too often. So thanks for asking it. Um, it's obvious to point to, sitting in a wheelchair and trying to take those first steps, looking down at my legs, they'd atrophied to the size of my wrists. And I was just like, man, maybe the doctors were right, where my
Yeah.
mom's still cheering me on. But interestingly enough, I'm not sure that's the exact toughest point, or there's another moment that comes to mind. My new book, The 12-Hour Walk, as I mentioned, I kind of break down all these common limiting beliefs. I share pieces of my story, and I keep the adventure readers excited by talking about being in Antarctica, rowing a boat across Drake Passage, being on the summit of Everest, etc. But I also want to share wisdom from moments in life that are extremely relatable to, that everyone has been through. And so there's a moment in that 18 months that was one of the most somewhat humiliating or horrifying moments in my life that I do write about in the book, which is I took this risk after college. I grew up, like I said, public school kid from Portland, Oregon. Managed to get a swimming. I managed to swim in college. I swam at Yale, so I ended up kind of at this university that was not like necessarily in my path. When the Yale swim coach called to recruit me, this is embarrassing. My first answer was Yale. I've heard of that. Where is that? And my mom's just like shaking her head, like, like that's not the first thing should be out of your mouth. But I was really humbled by the opportunity to have this great education. That certainly was far from my birthright. That's for sure. But there was still this curiosity in me. My friends, 2006, I graduated from college. Wall Street is high on its hog before the 2008, credit crisis. I have an economics degree, and friends of mine are getting these, real big time jobs. You're getting offered 120 grand. They're 22-year-old kids with, $10,000, $20,000 signing bonus, like ridiculous. Like I said, I grew up with very little. I'm painting houses and scrapping by on a few $1,000 to try to buy books. But there was something in that moment that I still was like, that doesn't feel like the right path for me. And so I told people in my family, like, hey, I'm actually going to go bum around the world with a backpack and a surfboard. And they're like, what do you mean? You have this like golden opportunity. I mean, don't get me, $120,000 a year at any age is a nice chunk of change. 22-year-old, never being around that kind of money or wealth or whatever in my life to that point is like, that's a massive opportunity. And still I'm saying, actually, I'm going to go take my backpack and a surfboard and, hitchhike and bum around the world. There's plenty of people close to me that were like, what the hell are you thinking? And then it ends with me burning myself in this fire, right? This justification of like, yeah, man, like you blew it and you almost killed yourself, or you might not walk again. Like it just is like this compounding failure, right?
Mhm.
And there was times I felt that way. And so I'm in my parents' basement. I'm trying to learn how to walk again normally. And I'm like, okay, maybe I need to get my life, quote unquote, back on track. And so I start applying to jobs. And I get offered a job interview at a commodities trading firm in Chicago. And they say, hey, we'll fly you out here. And so I'm like, okay, like this is a great opportunity. And I talk about this, like I said, just trying to get on with my life, trying to kind of put this terrible accident in the past. And I I'll never forget. I read about this in the book. I'm taking the elevator up to take this, kind of my first big time interview as a young person, kind of to land my first real job. And I'm looking in the mirror in the elevator, and, I've got this kind of sharp, crisp shirt on, dressed real smartly, tie, trying to like fit in with this. And then I look down at my feet, and I'm wearing slippers. I'm wearing fluffy bedroom slippers because my feet are still so badly burned. I can't wear shoes. I'm lucky that I can even kind of hobble to this interview. And I'm like trying to get myself fired up to like look the CEO of this trading firm in the eye while I'm wearing like fuzzy, fluffy bedroom slippers. And I think anyone listening can picture, that job interview feeling where you're like sitting in the lobby, the receptionist says like, can I offer you some water? You're waiting for the person to come out to meet
awkward.
you. It's like so awkward. Yeah. And I'm like, it's slippers. And I'm just like mortified, but there's like this duality in my mind, which is like, I got to try this. I got to get out of my parents' basement. I got to like, get my life back on track. But it's like, or maybe should I have waited a few months till I could have worn shoot? Well, it's that kind of a thing. Yeah. Fortunately, the guy had a good laugh at my expense, but I told him the whole story, and he was like, well, I guess you're gritty. I give you respect for even showing up here like this. It offers me the job. And I did that job all until I went and quit that job to pursue different things that were far less lucrative in pursuit of, sport and athletics that have taken me down this path after the athletic. But I don't know if that's the hardest thing that happened in that 18 months, but it's certainly one of the more like mortifyingly awkward, weird things of like, you have this accident, you have this injury, and then you're trying to get on with your life. And how do you really put it behind you? And in that sense, I couldn't hide it. Right. So anyways, lots of weird, funny twists and turns, but trying to have to face the world and just being like, here's who I am. Here's who I am in this moment, and owning that truth, because the story, I've learned to tell that story with a little more grace now, but you're like, well, how'd you burn yourself? It's one thing. Oh, I got in this terrible accident. It was way out of my control, whatever. They're like, wait a second. You were jumping a flaming jump rope? Like, are you a freaking idiot? Like, it's like, there's no one to blame but myself here, right? It's not just like, oh yeah, like, oh, woe is you, such a bad situation. It's like, no, you're an idiot, man, bro. Like,
I still can't believe they let you jump in. Like, what a ballsy move for a bunch of people. But then again, I mean, they are jumping a flaming jump rope.
It's crazy, man. You can Google this, like Thailand flaming jump rope, and it's more common than you would think it is. And usually, if it trips you kind of like your finger through a candle flame, your finger, kind of goes through the flame, doesn't get burned, it kind of knocks off you. But in my case, it tangled around me, had some excess kerosene, splattered my whole body, and the rest is history. But fortunate to make it back from that. So anyways.
Well, you're I mean, that's impressive that you went through with that. And I totally get it. Like, I can't say I would have done the same thing, but who knows, maybe I would have. But at the end of the day, like, it sounds like your options were either not endure what you did and still be stuck, like metaphorically, right? But like stuck in your parents' basement, not moving on with your life, or endure that discomfort and that really awkward conversation and the experience with the slippers, and at least start to, or continue to move in the direction, or a direction that you wanted to go. I remember in college, I had this like accident. I slipped on tile and I split my eye open. And it was right before this huge career fair where I was going to meet all these different engineering companies. And I was just like, I ended up calling it, because I'm like, dude, I'm already a large human and I look like Frankenstein right now. Happening. So that's like what was going through my head. But I'm like, I didn't have a cool story. It was just like, someone flooded our hallway, like not that great. As you move to Chicago, you take this job and you start to kind of, start running, start training, you crush this triathlon. At what point did it, not that that's not serious, but there's levels here. Like, what was the next step then as you started to become this professional triathlete? You mentioned that, kind of alluded to, you moved away from the financial services sector. Like, what did that next window look like?
Yeah, so literally the day I won the Chicago Triathlon, I was coincidentally invited. One of my good friends, a girl I knew from college, invited me over to her parents' house for a barbecue that night. And her dad, not at the same firm, but also in Chicago, kind of a big time guy in trading. We are saying at a family barbecue, just shooting the shit. And he's like, "What'd you do today?" And I was like, "Well, I won the Chicago Triathlon." He was like, "What?" And he kind of knew I'd been burned, a little bit of the story.
Yeah.
And he just starts talking to me about my hopes and dreams. I'm 24 years old at this point. I always dreamed about being an Olympian. I always, I had this passion for sport my whole life. I was a Division I swimmer. And he was like, "Well, why aren't you pursuing that like with full force?" And I was like, "Because I need a job,"
Yeah.
And he was like, "Well, what if I became your first sponsor?" And this guy's name is Brian Gelber. He fundamentally changed my life. The ironic thing, and this is the part that was, a little bit interesting. And I do write in the book, The 12-Hour Walk, about this limiting belief of criticism. And he was very clear with me. He's like, "Hey, if you're serious about this, I'll help you out financially a little bit. I'll help you, train and fly to some races and stuff like this." But he's like, "But to be clear, like the career path you're on is a much more secure, lucrative path. Like being a professional triathlete is not like being in the MLB or the NBA. Like I'm still sleeping on buddies' couches, eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, but I at least can like train and race my bike every day." But the passion was there. And so I call up my grandmother, I call up my friends and family. Like, "I think I'm going to quit my job." And people again are like, "What?" Like, you didn't take the job out of college. You went and burned yourself in a fire. Like, super cool. You won
Don't
this
you
race.
learn?
Like, super cool. You won this race, man. But like, you gotta, like, when are you going to grow up? There's a lot of that. But there was something intuitively inside of me that said, quit your job. And I did. And then I went and slept on a bunch of couches for the next 5 or 6 years, and raced triathlon professionally for about 5 or 6 years in pursuit of the Olympics. Interestingly enough, much to what everyone said, was I fell short of that goal. I raced at the top level. I was highly ranked. I was, surrounded by Olympians, the best athletes in the world, raced on 25 countries, 6 continents, but, didn't quite, get to that Olympic caliber. I was in kind of the long short list, but not the short list of making the team. And that's very easy to perceive that as a failure also. Like, "Yo, dude, then you left this behind, then you went in this and you didn't make the thing. Like, now what?" Interestingly enough, another massive turning point that gets into the expeditions was I got engaged in 2014 to my wife, Jenna. We actually met right before the fire. We've been together for 15 years and had an incredible relationship, but she's also been my business partner, my co-confidant, fellow dreamer, all the things we've done, from walking across Antarctica alone. I mean, she's been in the weeds, not just as a, loving emotional support, but really deep in the, the granular details of this. And that shift really started out, we're on a mountaintop in Ecuador where we got engaged, and conjuring a little bit of what my mom taught me in that hospital room. I was like a thought experiment, like, "Okay, we're getting married. Let's dream without limits. If we could make our life anything we will want it to be, what does our best life look like? What is our, what is our life together? What impact do we want to have? What experiences do we want to cultivate? What's important to us?" And we talked about all sorts of things about, definitely want to have family one day, different values we have, et cetera. And then immediately we kind of set our sights. I said, "Look, this childhood Everest dream has always been in my mind. And one thing I've loved about triathlon has been to push my body. The only thing it's felt a limited limit in terms of impact beyond myself." And Jenna's super passionate about impact. And we thought, well, what if we like put together a big mountaineering expedition kind of project that included Everest? It was something called the Explorers Grand Slam. So that's to climb the tallest mountain on each of the 7 continents and go to the North and South Pole. Like at the time, about fewer than 50 people in history had ever completed that feat. But I said, what if I try to set the world record for this, which is to climb them all consecutively without stopping over 4 months. So that's Everest, Denali, Kilimanjaro, trek to the North Pole, trek to the South Pole, all this kind of stuff. And we thought, but what if we could, attach that to a cause, to start a nonprofit around inspiring young people to get outside, move their bodies, live active, healthy lives, achieve their dreams. And so on this mountaintop with this possible mindset, we're like so full up of this idea, this is going to be amazing. We're going to do all these things, whatever. But then the next moment is the moment where I've realized so many great ideas and passions die, which is we found ourselves, no longer on our engagement trip back home in our 1-bedroom apartment in Portland, Oregon with nothing.
Yeah.
This project, we penciled, it was easy to pencil it out. Going to the North Pole, South Pole, Everest, like the logistics are obscenely expensive. It's going to cost 500 grand to pull off this project. We've got a few $1,000 in the bank, nothing like that. We have no idea about how starting a nonprofit. We have nothing, no resources, no money, no connections, no network. Like, it's pretty easy to go, like, it's like when you're drinking beers with your buddy and you're like, yo, bro, we're going to run that marathon in a few months. We're going to train, like whatever. And you wake up on Monday morning hungover and you're like, yeah, man, like I had a few too many beers. Like,
Yeah. Can't
if
believe
that,
you said
we're
that.
not going to do that. It's ridiculous. Or the person that has a great business idea, right? And then it's like, yeah, but like the risk I would have to take on if what it doesn't, all the reasons, again, those limiting beliefs, those doubts, those fears that arise. But instead, we looked at the other way. We were like, okay, we have none of those things. We've got a couple computers. We've got an internet connection. We've got Google. Let's just start emailing people. Let's start talking to people. Let's start figuring this out. And fast forward 18 months, we put together a website, pitched hundreds of sponsors, got hundreds of doors slammed in our face, but eventually did start the beginning of our nonprofit, raised just enough money, and embarked on this expedition. And ultimately, a couple years after the dreaming, but it took 4+ months, 139 days nonstop climbing. I did set those first 2 world records, and that set the platform for our nonprofit. We've ultimately had 1 million students enrolled in our programs, over time, and that certainly laid the groundwork for, well, after that, what's my next Everest? Well, what if I could become not just set a world record, but become the first person in history to do something that no one's ever done? And that led to this solo crossing of Antarctica and the several other big expeditions and adventures that I've been on ever since. And it's always been this parody of, how can I push my own body? How can I grow through these experiences and in the realm that lights me up, the ends of the earth and mountaintops, so to speak? But also, how can we do that in a way and share those stories with the world that also has exponential impact, whether that's through our nonprofit, whether that's, this new book, The 12-Hour Walk, which is at its core a call to action for people to take a one-day adventure of their own that is anyone can do, that costs nothing, that I fundamentally believe will shift your mindset from a mindset of limiting beliefs to a mindset, a possible mindset, and unlock really life's potential and limitless possibilities. So that has been what has lit me up over these years. There's so many great adventure stories. We could talk about any of those, but really to me, it's the connection between those pursuits and how they can apply beyond just myself.
Dude, one thing that you've talked about a couple times, and I'd really love to dissect it for people, is this idea of limiting beliefs. And I think that one thing that at least I've found in my journey is it's always easier to shatter limiting beliefs when we've been through some really hard shit, or when we've done something really challenging, right? Everyone talks about ice baths and cold showers, and there's all these great benefits from like a cellular level, and those things are great. But the reason I do them is because it will be the hardest part of my day, and everything else by comparison is easier. And I think that's a really powerful tool with respect to shattering limiting beliefs. And obviously you have some pretty interesting comparisons from early in your journey that can shatter a lot of those beliefs. Outside of that, like, is that the major tool that you use to shatter them? Or do you have a process? Like, how does one break through these limiting beliefs when they're seemingly debilitating and paralyzing?
I'm smiling because this is such a great question, and this really strikes at the core of my passion. And like I said, why I'm so excited to share this book, The 12-Hour Walk, with the world, because at its core, it is that it's a call to action to take on your own challenge. So the book itself is broken down to 10 core chapters. I polled my Instagram audience and asked hundreds of thousands of people, what is standing in the way of you living your best life? What I just wanted to get a bunch of answers to that question, to just kind of hear if there were patterns or if there was a million different answers or whatever. And it turned out that there was about 10 really consistent answers to this question. And there weren't thousands of answers to this question. And they were what I kind of put into what I think are the 10 most common limiting beliefs that I have struggled with myself in my own life. And clearly with my large sample size, so are lots and thousands of other people. And they're, what's standing in the way? I don't have enough money. I don't have enough time. I'm not strong enough. What if I fail? What if people criticize me? I don't like being uncomfortable, right? And each one of the stories in the book, I keep the reader engaged. I just had a really nice review from Booklist. It said, from the self-development crowd to the adrenaline thrill seekers alike, there's something in this book for everyone, which is the storytelling is rich from some of these very exciting, remote corners of the world, but also grounded in a way that's digestible for everyone. But this is not a book. I am not the hero of the story of this book. This is not a book like, hey, look at me, I've done a bunch of cool shit. Like, you should do cool shit too. It's saying I learned something when I was out there. And in fact, after walking across Antarctica, I found some deep, blissful moments walking across Antarctica in the most difficult time of life. 54 days alone, minus 40 degrees every single day, pulling a 375-pound sled. And I ultimately had to pull my sled 12 hours every single day so I wouldn't run out of food. I was on my last bite of food when I got to the end. My hips were sticking out. My ribs were sticking out. I had been burning 10,000 calories a day, but I could only carry 7,000. So I was on a 3,000 calorie deficit every single day. People had tried this crossing before me. One guy made it 71 days and ultimately fell ill near the finish line and died. Another guy got evacuated because he ran out of food and supplies. So, this was right on the edges of possibility. But despite that, I found in these moments of silence, in these blissful moments of pulling my sled, a lot of inner peace, a lot of joy, a lot of purpose, a lot of fulfillment, a lot of clarity. And so I thought that I'd kind of hacked this, like, oh, well, now I can take this through the rest of my life. And for the next year or so, things were great. I wrote a different book that was a New York Times bestseller about that crossing, some other, kind of external successes, did some other expeditions I'm proud of. And then COVID hits. And just like everyone, myself included, and certainly my worries are not as big as the rest of the world's of sickness and death and fear, but I was locked in a house just like everyone else. Me, my wife, my dog were on the Oregon coast, and I'm just depressed, man. Like, everything I thought I had going on this year wiped out of the books. Nothing's going on, career slow, and just like, what is happening in the world? Just this intense sadness. There was a few days in a row where I didn't get out of my own pajamas. My wife kind of looking at me like, yo, you gonna get your shit together? Like, what, I was just like in a bad place. And I think a lot of people can remember what that felt like. Right. And so I thought back to when was the last time I felt a lot of clarity. And I said, it's weird. This is the hardest moment of my life, strangely enough, pulling the sled across Antarctica, but it was also kind of the cleanest, purest part of my life. So I said to my wife, this might sound ridiculous, but I'm willing to try anything at this point to get out of my own way, to kind of shake off this, deep, dark funk that I have going on during this COVID lockdown. And I said, tomorrow I'm going for a walk. In fact, I'm going to go for a 12-hour walk. So don't worry about me. And she's like, yeah, whatever, suit yourself. And so I walk out my front door. We're on the Oregon coast. My family has a little cabin out there. And the tiny little town, there's no one around. It's a kind of a rainy Pacific Northwest kind of day. And 20 minutes into the walk, my phone buzzes in my pocket. And I instinctively, someone texts me, I instinctively pull my phone out of my pocket to check my text. And something tells me like, wait a second, you spent the last however long, doom scrolling the news, everything about COVID, Zoom calling your family, checking your social media, obsessive, like just take a break, man. And so I put my phone on airplane mode. And I end up walking alone in silence, no podcast, no music, no external inputs, not talking to anybody for 12 hours that day. And I come back around sunset and I open the door. And I remember before I even say anything, my wife looks at me and she just kind of smiles and she's like, it worked, right? And I was like, I don't know if it worked, but I feel better than I have felt in so long. And it was this moment where I thought, okay, so I'm this guy who's walked across Antarctica and done these hard physical things and whatever. So like, this is cool. This is an important thing that I tapped into this, then my body, mind, spirit through this 12-hour walk. But is this applicable to other people? And I had a lot of other friends, as I think we all did in this COVID moment of time, that were also struggling, man. Like, yo, like I'm just lacking purpose and direction. And the world has changed so dramatically, so quickly. So I instantly called up a bunch of friends, family members, buddies, people of all different ages. And I said, hey, I did this thing. If you're interested, give it a shot. And people's first reaction was, well, I'm not fit enough to walk for that long. And I said, look, the exercise actually wasn't a physicality. I don't care if you walk for 1 mile or 50 miles. I took breaks. Take as many breaks as you want. The power was actually in just shutting it all off for a day, spending a day alone in silence. And so I had all sorts of people try this out, including, on an extreme level, my 77-year-old mother-in-law, who she did her 12-hour walk by walking 1 block around her neighborhood, then sitting on her front porch, but in silence and stillness by herself. An hour later, taking another one walk around the block and sitting on her porch. And that's her 12-hour walk. And that is for sure the same exercise, a deep journey into the mind. And what I have found, and what this book ultimately is about, is each one of the chapters, to your previous question, is about a limiting belief. And I talk about, through storytelling, through prescriptive advice, how we can break those down. But at its core, it is actually a single, simple call to action to say, to what you said about the cold showers, is you want to have a massive shift in your life. Here's something that you can do in one day. The subtitle of the book is Invest One Day, Conquer Your Mind, and Unlock Your Best Life. It is a step outside of your comfort zone. Lots of limiting beliefs are going to pop up throughout the process of this. But by doing this hard, challenging thing, one day, it's not even a full day, it's 12 hours. I have seen life-changing impacts of this with people from all walks of life, rich, poor, old, young, all different backgrounds, all different circumstances. There is something that is so powerful about taking this moment in this busy, noisy world. And this is not to vilify technology and say, and now you should become a monk after this and sit in a Himalayan cave by yourself. This is to say, like, look, just like me, I'm on my social media. You and I are talking on a podcast, not sitting in the same room, using technology to our advantage. I'm a normal guy, I live a normal life in that regard. But there is a time in this busy, digitally connected world to just take a moment to be alone with your own thoughts. And guess what? It is scary for a little bit. Guess what? It is challenging. Just like turning on that cold water and being like, that resistance that you have to wanting to jump in that cold water shower at the beginning of the day. But then when you get out of it, you're like, oh God, I'm so glad I did that. And that's what the 12-hour walk is. It's a book. It's a book I'm proud of. Hopefully people listen, go out and buy the book. But you can also literally, what I want people to take away from this is something that is free, something that is accessible, something that you can do any single day. Put your shoes on, put a day on the calendar, put your phone in airplane mode, and take this walk. I promise you that if you're dealing with limiting beliefs, if you're struggling with things in your mind, any of those limiting beliefs that I mentioned, you will be a different person on the other side of this walk. You will have solved some of those problems in your own mind. You will be much closer to unlocking that possible mindset and unlocking your best life on the other side of this journey. And that's what I'm passionate about sharing with the world, with this concept, which is, to me, more than a book. It's really a global movement that I'm hoping to spark, because I think the more people that take just that day to tap into their own self, the world is a better place, and the ripple effects of positivity from that are immense.
I love that the answer is silence, really. And I think so many people need to hear that right now. We're so inundated with the stats about how many people, or how many times the average human looks at their phone, is just an absurd number. And I'm just as guilty as anybody. I built a business off of Instagram and this little phone. Like, I get it. And it's very important. But to your point, Colin, I think the most important thing here is those are tools to be leveraged, but not to fall victim to. And by being able to unplug and facilitate that silence and create that space for ourselves, I'm not surprised that that was the shift for you. And I can't wait to see, especially as by the time this episode goes live, the book will be going live as well. I can't wait to see what comes to fruition with all of the above. One thing that I want to dive into quickly before we wrap up, because I want to be respectful of your time here. I'm always interested, all of my friends who do any sort of endurance sport or anything like that, a good buddy of mine, a mentor of mine, just finished his first triathlon. He actually just dislocated his shoulder not too long ago. So he literally doggy paddled for a mile, but he crushed it. He hit every PR that he wanted to.
Amazing.
And he reinforced everything that all of my other buddies have said, which is the mental gains that are created and achieved during any wildly extensive or any wildly strenuous activity, any endurance type activity, are unparalleled. If you go back to that day, that one first 12-hour walk, were there a few key takeaways as you achieved that clarity Like obviously it led to this whole movement that you're building, but what stuck out to you the most as you achieved that like mental state that seems to only come from these endurance type of experiences?
Totally. No, it's an excellent question. So obviously, as I said before, the 12 hours, and the reason I even had the idea was derived from my time in Antarctica, 54 days in a row of these 12-hour walks, which, to be honest, pulling a 300 and some pound sled, minus 40 degrees outside, 50-mile-per-hour wind in your face, like that's brutal, man. And to do that one day is ridiculous. To do it 54 days in a row. Sometimes I even look back on that and I'm like, what the hell was I thinking? I mean, that's like the world's worst idea ever. Meaning there was a lot of suffering that went into that. Then getting to the end, not because actually of the achievement, but more of what I found inside, this resonance of connection and fulfillment and clarity. But finishing this and completing it was one of the highest highs of my life, right? Just riding so high. And what I come to realize is, people even ask me sometimes, well, you've done all these risky things, are you afraid of death? And I said, well, obviously I don't want to die. Obviously I don't have a death wish. And I try to be as careful as I can. What I'm most afraid of is not living. And I love the Thoreau quote. I actually opened the book with it, which is the mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. And it's often misquoted the second half, which says, and die with their song still inside of them. And I've come to think about life, and in that first 12-hour walk, this really occurred to me. And it's something that's been a guiding principle for me ever since, which is I've come to think about life on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being our lowest lows, the burn accident in Thailand, the doctor telling me you're never going to walk again normally. And 10 being our highest highs, falling in love, touching the post and knowing I finished the Antarctica crossing, a multitude of other things. But take Antarctica for a second, or the 12-hour walk. The finishing that was a 10, but I realized I didn't get to that 10 in spite of my ones, but actually because of them, because I got burned in that fire and my mom taught me that lesson, because I was willing to push through that many storms on the Antarctic ice. That's why I felt the 10. And too often in our modern society, I find that people are stuck in this, what I call the zone of comfortable complacency, this 4 to 6 range. It's like, yeah, man, I got a job, like it pays the bills, I got a roof over my head, like it's fine, it's fine, I've been dating the same person for a few years, and like, we don't fight. There's certainly not like abuse or anything bad going on, but it's like, like we cohabitate, it's fine, it's not a 1, but it's not a 10, right? But people are so afraid of upsetting the apple cart or taking that risk. They're hedging so hard against not experiencing any ones. The byproduct of that is they're also not experiencing any 10s. Or if the the parabola or the pendulum is swinging from 1 to 10, if you don't allow yourself to experience 2, you're not going to get to 9. Meaning, I have come to believe that I think the foundational element of the full tapestry of life is actually allowing ourselves to feel that full spectrum. It's been said a million times, stepping outside of the comfort zone, out of that zone of comfortable complacency, that's ultimate where the juice, the essence of life is. That is where we grow. And so the 12-hour walk in that first time, I'll admit, even for me, right, just off the couch, hey, I'm going to walk for 12 hours. Like I said, I took some breaks, but I kept moving most of the time. My feet got tired. My body got tired. Those first few hours, to be honest, I had that monkey mind just going like, what are you doing? And COVID and this, and, it's all this sort of negativity and this, like it'd be a lot easier just listen to podcasts or music or rock out or go home and binge Netflix. Like that would just be a lot easier right now. Meaning, I felt some low moments on that first walk, but the clarity by the end of the walk, by pushing myself past the inertia of, oh, I don't want to do this, this is uncomfortable, allowed just in those 12 hours, the pendulum to swing back towards its peak arc the other way. And as I said, I opened the door back up and my wife's like, oh, you're back. You're centered again. You're grounded again. She knows that side of me, the most best expressed version of myself. And so that is something that I've learned about the 12-hour walk. And I'll take it, one step further as we conclude this conversation, which is what I've learned about the 12-hour walk and sharing this idea with people is the exercise actually starts right now. Might sound ridiculous. Of course, the exercise is putting this on your calendar, taking a walk, 12 hours. And you can do this any single day, but I am inviting mass participation on September 10th. So if you're listening to this and you're seeking a day to put this on your calendar, September 10th, I'll be walking. There's already thousands of other people walking. You're going to be walking alone from your front door, but you're going to have that accountability of others. But as I invite you on this journey, or you're just listening to this podcast, of Mike and I talking here, there's at least 1% of you that's asking yourself this question: should I do this or shouldn't I do this? Is this for me? And maybe there's someone that's going like, oh my God, thank you. This is exactly what I need. I've already signed up. Great. Welcome to the club. Welcome to the tribe. And there might be someone going, this is the stupidest freaking idea that I've ever heard in my entire life. Like, I actually just turned off this podcast right now. I'm not listening anymore. But I think actually most people are in between that. They're going like, okay, this is interesting. Should I do this? Shouldn't I do this? Whatever. But then there's an inner voice inside of your brain right now that is assigning some in the column of should I not do this? Limiting beliefs of some kind are popping up in your mind. It's funny. I've done this walk. It's my own thing. I created this idea. And even every time I put it on my calendar, I'm like, oh, is Saturday good? Because I have got this other thing. And do I have enough time for it? And whatever. Meaning there are limiting beliefs popping up in your head right now. And part of this exercise is by even listening to this conversation, I'm holding up a mirror to you right now, to your own interior dialogue. That's why the exercise starts right now. And I'm willing to bet that if you're assigning a handful of limiting beliefs to why you may not want to do the 12-hour walk, those are actually the same limiting beliefs that are occurring for you over and over and over again as other opportunities, other curiosities, other doors that are potentially open to you, you close them before taking the first step. Meaning, what may be standing in the way of you and unlocking your best life is this loop of limiting beliefs. But if you can push them aside and say, you know what, despite these things or the things telling me why I shouldn't do this, I'm going to commit to the 12-hour walk. I'm going to push through a little bit of discomfort. I might experience a 1, a 2, or a 3 out there. When you get back to your front door, having completed this, you will have pushed through those limiting beliefs. And the next time those same patterns, habit patterns in your brain pop up around this limiting belief or not, you're going to go, I remember the last time I had this limiting belief, but I chose not to listen to it. Instead, I chose to do the 12-hour walk. I have a little bit more of a possible mindset now. And iteratively, that ripple effect, that limiting belief voice will get quieter and quieter and quieter. And so really what I love about this exercise is actually this moment, the moment that you're sitting at a dinner table with somebody and someone goes, yo, I did this crazy thing called the 12-hour walk. And your friend's like, what the hell? That's a stupid idea. And then you're like, is it? Is it? Evaluate what you think in other aspects of your life. And so, like I said, I'm super passionate about this, and 12hourwalk.com's got all the information. You can find the book anywhere. You can sign up on the website for free to participate any day. If September 10th doesn't work, pick any other day. And honestly, the reason I'm inviting people on September 10th is this accountability. But I've also found with other people, if you've got a couple of buddies, or if you got a friend or a spouse or whatever, walk alone. But call up a couple of your friends in a group chat or a text that you have, and text 5 of your friends and be like, hey, let's all do this on fill in the blank date, meaning you're all going to leave from your own house, but you have that accountability to go on, we're all doing this. And after you spend that time in silence, you get back to your house a little bit tired and exhausted, but fulfilled from that day, you can call each other up and know that you can share and integrate that experience together. So it is in its essence alone, but there's a lot of community aspects of it I think can be very powerful. So
that's super cool. You said
12. Mike, you doing it? You doing it? You doing it?
Yeah, I'm in 100%. 12hourwalk.com.
12hourwalk.com. Yeah, 12hourwalk.com. It's got all the info, lots of FAQs. Obviously, the book is an essential companion to that, but the website's got all sorts of information, and you can sign up. And really what signing up means is being in contact with me, because I want to help support, answer any questions you got, send you some inspirational emails to, encourage you along the way. But really, this is an expression, I think, of just resonant positivity, and it's meant to just be as accessible for anyone. I will say you can wait if you want to go on vacation and be on some beautiful trail. One question I get all the time is, well, I live in New York City, I couldn't possibly do the 12-hour walk. I'm like, no, actually, it's meant to be done outside your front door. Ambient city noise, other people walking past you on the street doesn't betray your silence. Your solitude is a commitment to yourself. And I've actually found that saying, oh, I'm going to do it this other day outside of my regular life doesn't actually imprint as deep, interestingly enough, because if you walk out your front door and you come back to your front door, now all of a sudden this imprints on your daily life. It's not part of vacation or other, but you might be commuting to work and you're 3 miles from your house at some intersection a couple weeks after you're walking. You're like, ooh, I remember I walked past here and I was thinking about this in hour 5. And so it actually becomes even more part of your daily conscious. And that's super powerful as well. So anywhere you are, this requires no money, no cost. It requires you committing to the time. And if the limiting belief is I don't have enough time, buy the book, because there's an entire chapter how we can break that down as well and move past that in our life. Because 12 hours might seem like a long amount of time, but how many days this year can you not even remember what you did? I promise you'll remember this and you'll take the positive benefit from it forward throughout the rest of your life.
Boom. And if you live in New York City, like what better place to do it? Like you're supposed to just walk everywhere in New York City.
The best walking place.
My old random aside, my old roommate literally the other day walked from Tip to like the whole entire city.
I love walking New York. To me, I almost designed this idea with New York in mind. Like walk around New York City is like my jam. Totally. People have told me about a guy emailed me yesterday, 70-year-old guy actually, who heard about the 12-hour walk, said that he for years has done this 34-mile walk, which is the entire circumference of the Manhattan Island, I think, through the different bike paths and certain needs. And he's like, funny enough, it usually takes me about 12 hours. He's like, I love this, New York City, don't sleep on New York City. And I was like, oh no, man, New York City is the place for this as well.
Let's go. Okay. So 12hourwalk.com. Where do you hang out most on social? If people want to follow along with your journey, Colin, plug away.
Yeah. So at Colin O'Brady on Instagram is kind of mostly where I am on social. You can find me in other couple places, but that's the main place. But 12hourwalk.com. And also by the time this podcast comes out, the app will be out as well. So there is an app for the 12-hour walk. Funny enough, what the app does really is puts your phone on airplane mode, but it allows you to still have Google Maps up. So it tracks your walk. So people aren't lost or afraid or scared, but it, kind of quiets the rest of your phone so you can focus on the walk itself. And so, sign up on the walk, download the app, do the walk, participate, come join me on September 10th. If that lights you up, buy the book, 12-hour walk. You can find it anywhere books are sold. And like I said, I'm just passionate about sharing this idea and helping everyone, myself included, to continue to cultivate that possible mindset and unlock our best lives.
Boom. Colin, last question I have for you, going all the way back. Graduating, deciding, hey, I'm not going to go the finance route like all my buddies. I'm going to go and travel the world with the couple $1,000 I've saved, ending up in Thailand, experiencing the burn, your mother instilling all that positivity, coming back 18 months and finally experiencing, after all of that rehab, having the new job, winning the Chicago Triathlon, right? Then deciding, hey, I'm going to be a professional triathlete, going in and competing at the top level, just barely falling short of the Olympics, but competing at this massive level, this entire journey all the way to where you're at right now, right? Creating this massive movement, this another soon to be best-selling book launching, all of the above, right? This entire window. 10 world records later, we don't have time for all the accolades. What has been the biggest lesson that you've learned that has yielded the most results and had the biggest impact on your life and in your business?
Oh man, it's a good question. And, I'm going to answer just from the heart what comes up first. And I think this would be my answer, even if I sat here and thought about it for an hour. I think my answer is pretty clear, which is it's about relationships, man. It's about love. What I've been fortunate to cultivate with my wife, but also just my inner circle, none of the rest of it matters, man. If I got to the end of that Antarctica crossing and I'm on Fallon, the newspaper, New York Times put me on the front page, like whatever, but there's no one to share that with. No one that's just like my real person, my people. Yeah. It wouldn't matter, man. None of it would matter. And so I think one of the biggest lessons is, obviously I'm a very goal-oriented person. I've been driven by some external achievements and I'm proud of those things. But without that foundational level of love, camaraderie, respect, and that extends beyond romantic love. That extends beyond the inner circle of if you're building a company or the company you keep, the family, the community, your chosen family. To me, that's the fabric of a life well lived. And so all of these things that we're talking about, if they required sacrificing that or sacrificing integrity around nurturing those relationships, none of it would matter.
Boom. Colin, thanks for joining me, brother. I really enjoyed this.
My pleasure. Thanks, Mike.
100%.